Hello very much. It's currently 12, 50, not 50, 23. It's currently 12:23 at night or morning, if you're fun like that, on All Hallows Eve, October 31st. And I thought I would tell some scary stories that they don't really exist, but they're in there. I've always wanted to tell some stories for Halloween because it just seems very fitting. It's raining out right now, and I have my Yankee candles. I'm very excited for this Halloween. Everything feels right. Anyway, this first story is about a boy named Fred. And this boy, Fred, he went to a school like any other kids, but he was very lonely. And he always got bullied for his horns and his fangs, and the kids would pick on him. He wore corduroy suspenders and a blue, like, blouse with ruffles on it and a tie. He was very into fashion, and he just had this way about him. And one day, Fred was, he was eating lunch all alone in the little corner table of the cafeteria that he would always eat at, all alone, sad. He was eating his poor, disgusting school lunch. It was stale chicken nuggets and the worst, sloppiest mashed potatoes that he'd ever had in his life. And he just was so unhappy with his life, and he felt so alone. But a girl came over, and she sat next to him. She's wearing a little pink dress, and she had a few ribbons in her hair. And he noticed she had her nails done recently, and they were done red with like little speckles to look like strawberries. And he thought they were just a darling. He thought they were just the most darling nails he had ever seen. And yeah, it's so good. Just worried there might have been technical difficulties, but there isn't. She came to sit down with him. And she introduced herself. Her name was Mary. And he said, "Hello, my name's Fred. I like to draw. I like to paint. I'm into fashion." And she smiled at him. And he finally felt understood. And he could just tell that they were going to be the best of friends. And then on, every day after school, they hang out and walk around the quaint little rustic Gothic downtown near their school. And sometimes they'd go to the supermarket and buy a few cartons of eggs and then walk to the previous bullies' houses and just go to town with them. He's smashing eggs all over the place, and then when the people would come out, they'd run away before they got caught, and they just got up to all sorts of trouble, and they just had such a fun time. Till about 6 months later, one day, Fred was walking between classes, and a group of bullies, different people than he'd previously encountered, stepped in front of him, and they started yelling at him, "Freak! You're the monster! You're evil! You're not like the rest!" And they started slapping him and patting him, kicking him in the stomach, and he was crying and crying, and his hair was tattered, and they were ripping at his horns, and they were trying to rip his tongue out, all these things, and he felt so scared, and then he felt so lost, and he didn't know what to do. So he got up and he started running and running and running, and he was so worried about so many things, about what they were saying about him, and he could feel the worry just pooling inside of him, and he ran and he ran and he ran into the forest by the school, and he made it to this little clearing behind the school, and he just sat there and looked at the trees for a bit, until about 10 minutes later, Mary came. She came running towards him, and she saw him crying, looking at the trees, and she asked him, "Fred, what's wrong?" And he said, "Didn't you see the bullies? Didn't you see them clawing at me, pulling at me?" And she said, "No, I wasn't there." And he said, "They almost got me. They almost got me this time." And Fred was never really one for physical affection, not much of a hugger, but Mary was, and so she came close to him, and he didn't back away. He felt safe with her, and he knew she wasn't going to do him any harm. She wrapped her tiny little pink arms around him, and they just hugged. And she rested her head on his shoulder. And then, when she took it away, the way she smiled at him, he felt like he was in control again. And he liked that feeling. And he wanted to feel more of it. And so, he opened his mouth wider than anyone had ever seen, and he ate her whole. In one bite, she didn't scream, and she just fell into him, into his stomach, legs up, and she was dead just like that. And he felt full, and he felt satisfied, and he felt that all was right. And when he finished digesting her, he licked his lips, dusted himself off with the dirty fall leaves on his jeans. Well, he wasn't wearing jeans. I said he was wearing corduroy. He's a fashionista, though, he gets into all sorts of stuff. He dusted his legs off, and he marched straight back into that school like nothing had happened, because he knew he was always going to be in control, and he knew if anyone ever did that to him, anything mean or anything nice, and he felt powerless, he knew what to do. And that's the story of Fred. The end. Hope you enjoyed that. That was the first first story that it's not. I mean, I kind of thought of it a little while ago. I like telling things on the spot though because they kind of come out different than if you were gonna like write them down or whatever. Um, it's kind of fun to me to, you know, tell them on the spot like that. Anyhow, what other stories are there? Oh, right. This story, it's more of a winter story, but it's still very spooky in my opinion. This story is about a waiter named Janet, and she worked at this 24-hour diner. And it was a very snowy night in January, late January, and it was around 4 o'clock, and it was just getting dark out. And she was wiping down tables around the diner. It was this quaint little 50s diner, and she looked out the foggy windows into the cold, and she'd been working since 9 in the morning, and she just wanted to go home and take a hot shower. And she could tell the storm was only gonna get worse now, because the snow was just coming down in sheets. And she was like, oh, I want to get home. Why would I even be here right now? And there were no customers. I mean, who the fuck would be at a diner right now? I mean, the roads were in horrible condition. The plows hadn't come through yet. So she was just kind of dilly-dallying. And after she finished wiping down the tables, she went behind the counter and sat on her little chair with her magazine. And she turned the radio up. And she heard a familiar voice of the radio DJ, Alan, who was on her favorite station. It was kind of a soft rock station, you know, crooner style. But in between songs, Alan started speaking, and he said, I hope you're all staying warm out on this cold, cold winter night. The roads are an absolute mess, and you better be staying in. And she wished she could honor his words, but he didn't know that, so it didn't really matter. Careful, the local sheriff has been seeing strange sightings, he said. But what do I know? But in all honesty, the sheriff had previously told him to relay that message, to tell the people, the townspeople, that there was something out there. So he did it in his jokingly manner, and she thought it was endearing. Well, that's all for now. Back to the music, he said. And the Bobby Vinton played and played, and she got back to looking through her little magazine. She was wondering if he was right, if there really was something out there, but he's probably just trying to scare her, keep the radio entertaining. I mean, people love entertainment at this hour. And then she started hearing her little landline, this white landline behind the counter. She started hearing it ring. So, as it was her job, she picked it up, and lo and behold, it was her boss, informing her that the other waiter would not be coming. And he asked her, he said, Janet, Timmy's real sick. He can't make it tonight. And the diner, it's been under so much stress recently with the tariffs and everything. I mean, we're almost going under. I know you're not going to like this, and I know it's the last thing you want to hear. And Janet, she exhaled before even hearing the next word he said, because she knew what it was and she didn't want to hear it, but he said it anyway. Janet, do you think you could cover Tim's shift? It would mean a lot. I'll give you double pay. Fine, Andrew, fine. And with that, she said, "Good night, Andrew. I'll close up at 8. And she hung up the phone and got back to her magazine. She stared out the frosty windows and tried to remind herself there was only 4 hours left till she could be in her nice warm home. Even though she was supposed to be home half an hour ago, but, well, here we are. She looked at her magazine pages, and it'd been a few hours since she had her last cup of coffee, and it was almost relaxing, the snowfall. It would have been creepy in any other circumstance, but she had a liking for darkness, and she just slowly drifted asleep on her magazine. And then she slowly drifted back awake. But when she woke up, the lights were off in the diner. And she was confused. At first, she thought she was almost dreaming or something, because it was all so surreal. I mean, this lovely little diner, it was just shrouded in darkness. And it wasn't just darkness, it was a dark energy that was there too. Something had shifted completely from before, and she was so taken aback she didn't want to believe it. And she almost froze for a second. She was so hesitant to continue with this path that she'd been put on, and she thought about it, and then, she got back to it and snapped back to the loop, and she looked around for a flashlight or something. I mean, she had to get the power back on in case people were coming, because she checked the clock and it was still only 6:30. She had 2 hours, well, an hour and a half. But she looked under the cabinets and she found a big chunky flashlight, one of the ones you'd use camping. It's not a tack light per se, but it's more circular shape. It's quite big. And she jangled it around, and she eventually got it to work. But she just, at this point, she was so frightened. And the only thing she could do to not be frightened was she dug through the cabinets, because she knew her manager always kept a little bottle of Jack Daniels somewhere, and she just took a few sips of it just to calm herself, and she could taste it, that nail polish remover flavor, and she just tried to stop shaking and took a deep breath, and just then as she took a deep breath. Of course, grand timing, her flashlight went out. And she tried to shake it, but it wouldn't go back on. No matter what she would do, it wouldn't go back on. And she was really freaking out by this point. And just then, in her hysteria, in her daze, she heard a banging on the door, which she didn't quite know what to do with it. She didn't know what to do at that point. It was all so much. The thoughts, the racing thoughts, they were swirling around her like the snow outside, and she didn't know what to do, so all she could do was what her mind told her to do. And she grabbed a knife and she ran into the bathroom. The door was already locked from previously. I mean, she was smart enough to lock it after wiping down the tables at 4 because she knew no one was going to come, so. She still found it quite ridiculous, though, that her manager wouldn't let her leave, even though, well, let's be real, they both know no one was going to come. Even if it was good weather, no one was going to come. That business was going under. But she took her knife and she ran into the bathroom, locked one of the stalls, and stood on the toilet seat. And from there, she heard the door open, and she could hear the breeze from the snowstorm coming in. And she thought in that moment it was all over. It was such an overwhelming feeling. It was pure terror, and it engulfed her in a way that she'd never experienced before. It was almost like this magnetic field, but it's like a magnet if it was put on the reverse end against another magnet on the reverse end, but in her heart, and it was just pulling it all apart. And she heard footsteps in the building, and she didn't know what to do, so she kept quivering and quivering until it was almost an impulsive instinct or something. In her hysterical state, which it might have been more hysterical than we think, because there's only so much stories tell about people. She, for whatever reason, stood up from the toilet seat, and she opened the bathroom door, and she just tiptoed to the hallway overlooking the back of the counter. And she saw a dark figure. She peered her head around that hallway, and it goes into the counter, and she just saw this dark figure rummaging around. And she thought she saw a gun on him, because it was just this black thing with a handle in his pocket, and she didn't know what it was. Which, hey, free carry, I mean, it would make sense, especially since they were wearing a camo jacket and a black beanie and snow pants. There was something familiar about that jacket, but she didn't know what. And then she ducked her head back away as they started coming over. And that feeling, it was even worse than before. It wasn't the same though. Something had changed about it. It was almost powerful in a way, maybe to make up for her pure humanistic terror that she was feeling. She gripped the knife with her sweating hands, it didn't even make sense because she was freezing the entire night. She gripped it, and as the figure walked around the corner, she pounced and sunk the blade into him in one foul swoop. She heard a grunt and then a thud as he fell on the floor. It was a very clean jab. She was almost surprised with herself. I mean, she had never had to stab someone before. She'd never had to defend herself like that. But it was remarkably central in the chest, near the heart, which, for someone who's never stabbed anyone, it felt a little uncanny to her. And as the figure slumped and started gasping and choking on his own blood, she knew she pierced the heart, and she was not going to die right now. But she looked at him. She looked at the man, and she realized, and I don't even know if the word's terror, it was so surreal. She couldn't even believe it. It felt all like a dream to her. She realized it was Tim. It was her coworker. And he was there to do his shift. And she was confused because her boss had said he wasn't going to make it because he was feeling sick. So just a million thoughts were racing through her mind. Of course, the logical explanation to all of this was he was feeling sick, but he was also broke, and he wasn't feeling that sick. But the storm was bad enough to knock down his phone lines after he called in the first time. And because of that, I mean, he knew how annoying it would be to make Janet work that shift, so he figured as much. I mean, it was only a 5-minute drive from his house. So he drove down the snowy road, and obviously he unlocked the door because he's a worker, he has keys. And those were the thoughts going through her mind about why he could possibly be here. And the funny thing is, no one knows if that's actually the true explanation of why he was there that night. As she noticed, he did have a gun in his pocket, matter of fact. But, well, he was dead. He had bled out. It was pouring from his mouth, and you can't question a dead man. And her state of pure horror, she was so frantic, and she'd been thinking about everything about her life now. It was all becoming so surreal. The pills she was taking before her shifts, during her shifts, she didn't even remember what she was taking. It all had become so regular to her that it was such a constant high that her life was. She almost forgot she was ever on anything. But I guess when she mixed it with the alcohol, it just became too much. And everything started to feel real again, but also perfectly unreal. And she started crying and gasping for air over his body. But she was still a very smart girl. And she knew she had to do something about this. Because as much as she hated her life and didn't want to feel anything, she still didn't want to go to jail. She'd much prefer working her mundane diner job. I mean, the pay was decent for how shit the business was. So, she knew what she had to do. And she wasn't even sure if she was strong enough to do it, but she did it anyway. Maybe it was the adrenaline, maybe it was the drugs. She picked up his body, well, by the legs at least, if you can call that picking it up. And she dragged it out the door and into the trunk of her beat up little sedan, and she just shoved him in there. There was only a slight trail of blood in the snow. So before she left to dump the body, she knew she had to clean up. So she went back inside, and she got a mop and broom. She cleaned up the kitchen first, where she had stabbed him. And then she cleaned up the hallway from the diner, the kitchen area, to the door, where there was blood. She didn't know what to do with the snow, though, because there was still some blood in the snow, so she just kind of walked around and stomped it and mixed it around so it didn't really look like anything. It did the trick. And she was just so wired by that point. She went back inside, and there was so much energy. There was so much... It was just a pure energy of like shakiness and anxiety, and it was just exploding in her. So she couldn't take it, so she just violently started wiping down the tables and crying and sobbing to herself. She looked out the window, out the frosted little pane. She saw the snowflakes, and she looked back at her car in the parking lot, and she thought she saw something move in front of it, because she would never back in. It'd be too crazy for her. She was a simple woman who craved darkness, but wanted the light. And she just tried to pat herself on the back and remind herself it's probably nothing. So, she finished wiping down the table for whatever reason, even though she'd already wiped it down 2 hours before. She locked the door, and, she didn't need to turn off the lights. She never got the power on anyway. She went out to her car, started it up. It stalled the first time, but she got it. And she backed up, and again, she thought she saw something in the mirror. It was like this. There was a glint of fur, like a silver white fur, in movement. But she figured maybe it was just the snow, and she was just too out of it to really understand. So she got on the road, and she was trying to think about where she could drive to. And she was having a very hard time formulating any real thoughts, as the mix of the mountainy, snowy roads, it was so dark and there was no other cars, and the worry, all of her thoughts were just kind of melting into each other in this abstract amalgamation, and it was so much for her. She couldn't even think of where to go. So she just kept driving and driving. And she didn't even realize, but she was getting higher. Literally, she was going up the mountain. And she thought about, maybe I can find a hiking trail and dump him there, or maybe a pond. Maybe she'll dump him in a pond, is what she thought to herself. She didn't realize how heavy the snow was getting, though, and her wipers were barely making anything. She could barely see, and it was only freaking her out more. She was so terrified still. It was all really sinking in now, too, and she wanted to explode. She wanted to explode so badly. There was no other word for it. And she started tearing up again. And it started as a few tears, and then it came out into her full-on sobbing, and she was swerving now, and she could barely keep it together. But then she slapped herself because she knew she didn't want to die. So she kept her eyes straight through the narrow gap of view on her windshield and looked past the snowflakes and tried to keep herself focused with the thought of her surviving and doing it and hiding the body. And then she saw something run in front of her car, and she gasped. She was so terrified. She thought it was maybe a deer or something, but it didn't look like a deer. And again, it had that white fur. And again, the worry of it all, it came crashing down in a final wave on her. She thought she could keep it together, but she knew by this point she couldn't, and it was all coming out, and she was just exploding everywhere. But she was still trying to drive her best, even if it was a little swervy. But in her state, it was hard. And then, as she almost got to the top of the hill, she looked to her left and saw the very steep drop down on this little mountain road. She thought it was funny she was driving such a dangerous road right now in this insane state. And she was like, maybe I won't make it out of this. And then she looked back front through that snowy gap in her windshield, and she saw a creature. And she screamed. She screamed the loudest scream she had ever screamed in her life. It was a scream of complete and utter humanistic, existential, it was acceptance. It was pure terror. But it was almost a calming scream in a way. I mean, she knew her fight was over, and she lost. But for whatever reason, she was still somewhat satisfied. And as the car rammed through the guardrail and off the snowy, snowy ledge, it plummeted hundreds of feet and landed in fire. She finally exploded for the last time, and all she could feel was white light, and all she could see was white light, and she just felt herself slowly, slowly fading into the snow and into everything else. And the next day, her manager, Andrew, was driving down the road, and he saw her car. Well, what was left of it. At that point, there were so many pieces, and it was just so tattered across the snow. You couldn't even call it a vehicle anymore. It was more just a abstract pile of scrap metal. And he gasped, and he pulled over on the side of the road and ran down through the snow. And he saw tracks besides the car, but that wasn't the important thing. But they did look interesting. It was like bear tracks, but they just didn't quite look right to him. He digged through the car and looked for her body. Of course, he was able to find Tim's body, and he thought that was strange. He wondered if they were maybe having an affair or something. Well, Tim was married, so he thought that was strange, but he was like, what if he's cheating on his wife? I mean, they work together, they know each other well, they have good chemistry. He thought it was possible. And then he looked for Janet's body, and he found it. It was almost curled up in this very, not a fetal position, but it's so hard to describe. It's the way a skeleton would lie. But of course she wasn't a skeleton yet. She was so blue. And he cried a little bit. I mean, she was one of his favorite workers. And now he knew the diner was really going to go under without the help. And he called the police, and they came down and pulled out the mess. And the officers questioned him. They questioned him on why the two were in the car together, why Tim had a gun on him. And they also questioned him. They questioned Mr. Andrew of the diner about why they were finding little specks of white fur by the car. And he chuckled a little bit because he knew there was something he didn't know, and he knew he wasn't going to figure it out. The end. That was a bit of a longer one, but that's I forget what that one's called. It's like a diner one. Alright, I think we probably have time for one more. This one isn't really a story. It's more just an experience that happened to me. I haven't really had anything paranormal happen to me per se. I mean, I've been pretty unbothered most of my life, thankfully. I don't have any desire to mess around with the paranormal, because they've never bothered me, so why the fuck would I bother them? It's kind of my motto. Never played with a Ouija board, never done any of that shit. I don't want to mess around with that. But the only thing that can come to mind right now is, I remember one night I was in my living room, and there's kind of like if you're in the living room, it's like the living room, the kitchen area, and then there's like a hallway back here. And I had a light on like here in the living room. And I just remember I kept looking at that hallway, and I swear on my life, I swear to God, there was a shadow man being projected onto the door in that hallway. And it just looked so real, and it looked so detailed to me. I mean, it was late in the night and I was tired and all, but I'm freaked out right now. It just looked so real to me. And I was trying to do schoolwork and stuff, but I couldn't pay attention to any of that because I got so freaked out. And I kept looking over there, and I swear to God, it was moving, and it was shifting, and it was looking at me. And there were a few moments when I wanted to cry. Because every now and then that will happen in my life. It's not often anymore, thankfully. I'm very desensitized by horror movies, but I'll get so freaked out by something. Like, it's just this... It's a very specific feeling, and I'm very thankful I have not experienced it much, but it just makes you want to cry. But I don't remember what happened. I'm pretty sure I got over it, or either got over it or I like inched my way around it and then went up the staircase and went to bed. It's pretty fucking freaky though. What are we gonna do? I don't know what we're gonna do. Do you know what we're gonna do? I don't know. Oh, I want to show you guys the Blu-rays that I got today. I went thrifting with my friend. Twilight Eclipse. This is the HD high definition Blu-ray. Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 1. I'm watching these with my boyfriend currently. Very fun. This is also HD. I got The Final Destination HD. I believe this is the one with the race car track, because there's a picture of the race car in the back. So I think it's like the fourth one or something. I don't remember. Oh, and I did get a DVD of Paranormal Activity. I just watched this. Classic. I mean, I'd seen it before, like, a long, long time ago, but I forgot how creepy it was. Anywho, Halloween is a very spooky holiday. It's very dangerous. Stay safe if you're trick-or-treating, if you're partying, whatever you may be doing this All Hallows Eve. Stay spooky, light a candle, have some candy, watch a movie. I'm going to be binging quite a few horror movies. I plan on watching Night of the Living Dead. Well, I'm going to watch Fright Night first, then Night of the Living Dead, and then if my Criterion Blu-rays get here, Inland Empire because I heard that's like spooky and creepy. So love me my David Lynch. So that will be cool. And have popcorn and candy and stuff. So I'm excited. I love Halloween. It's just I don't know. It's just a cool holiday. Anyhow, yeah. Stay safe, y'all. Eat a pancake for old time's sake. I can't sleep now. I'm actually kind of fucking freaked out. Good God. This video is so long, but bye. Don't die.